We have hit the lunch break for day 2 of the Puffy trial. This morning we started the cross-examination of Daniel Phillip. He closed out yesterday talking about how he spent 2012 and 2013 being hired by Diddy to perform with Diddy's girlfriend for Diddy's voyeuristic appetite. And that he did that for a couple of years and that he stopped being invited back after he had witnessed, or at least ear witnessed, assault that Diddy seemed to visit upon his girlfriend while they were in another room, and that changed the mood and atmosphere and the dynamic in that entire interaction. Now, on cross-examination, by most accounts, he held up fairly well and seemed to retain a great deal of his credibility while he was cross-examined by Xavier Donaldson. The one thing he admitted is that if he had the opportunity, he would have liked to have dated Cassie. So for whatever extent the jury's able to take from that he had some sort of motive of envy to make up things about Diddy, that's possible. But he came across as being very straightforward with his testimony, with a high degree of credibility, according to most of us who were watching him. The other thing that he was hit upon was that 3 months after he had witnessed an assault, or ear witnessed an assault on Cassie, that he sent out a text message to Cassie saying, I still love y'alls. And that Mr. Donaldson was trying to make the point that he was cool with whatever he had felt he had witnessed and wasn't having any problems with that. On redirect, Maureen Comey just asked one question: why did you send that text message? And he said, I was trying to reach out because I felt that they were alienated by the fact that what I had seen, and I had concerns for her and she wasn't responding. And I was hoping that if I wrote that I could hear back from her and check up on her to make sure she was okay. That was the end of Mr. Phillips. We had a sidebar at that point where there was an issue that the defense raised with respect to the fact that the next witness, which is Cassie Ventura, one of the featured players, who is the claimant, and the basis of one of the sexual trafficking charges, was going to be due next up to testify. And the defense said that they had issues with her current husband sitting in the trial for her testimony because they expect to try and impeach some of her testimony, potentially, by cross-examining him, bringing him up as an impeachment witness, depending on what Cassie would end up testifying to. So that the state was saying, hey, look, she needs him here as part of her support team. This is a very traumatic thing, and they're specifically referring to impeaching her with respect to an alleged rape that happened in 2018, which she has yet to testify about, but an alleged rape that happened at that time, which they say they might want to use him to impeach. And the judge ended up citing the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and saying that the defense is correct, that he cannot be there if they're going to anticipate, even if he's not on the current witness list, if they're anticipating they're going to rely upon him to rebut her testimony, they have a right to keep him out of the room. The defense consented out of sensitivity and consideration for Cassie to allow him to stay in the room for much of her testimony, and that when they reach the point of the testimony where she's talking about that part of her life, that they would hold a sidebar and ask her husband to step out of the room for the balance of that testimony. Now, Cassie ended up taking the stand shortly thereafter, and I want to give you her demeanor, because this is something that you're not going to see if you're reading transcripts, which unfortunately, due to the nature of the way things work in federal court, and here, particularly here in New York, all you get are transcripts, which is terrible. It's terrible. So in order for me to portray to you her demeanor, I'll tell you this: she seems utterly conflicted. She seems like she's in pain being there. She seems conflicted about testifying about Diddy. It is obvious she still has some sort of emotional connection to him on one level or another, where she feels uncomfortable testifying about him and at the same time somewhat resentful for the way she was allegedly physically abused, psychologically abused, and emotionally abused. That came out in the words that she chose, where sometimes she would, when she was asked questions by the state, like, did he come over unannounced? And her answer would be, sometimes. Well, how frequently? Not frequently. Too often. Sometimes frequently. Not too much. Like, even her words read as being conflicted, and that is thoroughly expressed in her demeanor and her tone, where she seems torn about whether or not she made these choices herself. Some of the language that she chose when she describes her relationship and why she did these things is she sort of says, I was in love. Well, I was in love, and statements like that are statements that the defense, presumably, if I was sitting on the defense team, I would love statements like that. Those are statements that are not expressing control and that she's coerced by and being trafficked by Diddy, but that she made poor choices because she was in love, which is a terrible tragedy, but not a crime that he can be convicted of. And other times she would describe some of the control that she experienced. She described how he bought her different houses and would always be nearby. Now, the relationship starts out as a quote-unquote business relationship, and it quickly evolves into something that goes well beyond that. Shortly after she had a hit album, Diddy signed her to a 10-album contract, or hit song. She had a hit song, and then he signed her to a 10-album contract. But the terms of the contract was that she gets no money unless albums are released. Part of the control that she alleges he exerted over her is that he would give her tons of busy work, force her to produce more and more songs, many of which would never be released and never meet, and that Diddy would never actually approve for release, which meant no money. And he would keep her, and she said when he would call, if you didn't pick up, he would call again, and text again, and call again incessantly. He would send security to her house to find out where she was if she wasn't picking up the call. So while she spent some time talking about the early halcyon days of her relationship, when everything was love and happiness, which started in a trip in Miami, that quickly became something that could seem very controlling. But the question is, will the jury look at that as a controlling boyfriend, or will they look at it as he was actually trafficking her? She did describe some of the freak-offs that she was pushed into trying, and she expressed how uncomfortable she was when she first started it. And yet at the same time, she said that she did it initially certainly out of love and out of a sense of responsibility to do that for her boyfriend. And the freak-offs that she described are where she would perform with a stranger while Diddy would watch. And those freak-offs sometimes could be exercises that would go on for many hours, if not days. And near the end of her testimony this morning, she was talking about how one experience lasted for 4 days, and that he would keep her on drugs, and she would need days to recover from it, from the exhaustion and dehydration that she would experience. She also described some of the physical abuse and how sometimes she was afraid that depending on his mood he would get violent with her, even if it wasn't something she had done. He was just in a bad mood, that she might suffer consequences from the fact that someone had upset him, or that if she gave him a look that wasn't if she wasn't smiling at him enough, and a frequent phrase would be "fix your face" or "you have a smart mouth," and that she would be very afraid of the repercussions that would come during those exchanges. She describes him as basically being very polarizing and in certain ways nearly bipolar, although that's not a term she herself used. But her description is of someone who's frequently changing from one mood to another and being on excesses, either being excessively charismatic or being excessively violent. But she describes herself at the same time as being incredibly jealous of any women who were part of his life. And that's why I say that this was a very conflicted testimony. And if this is the essence of where the state is coming from on one of their trafficking charges, you can understand why the defense is hopeful that at least some members of the jury will conclude that this was not a crime. This was simply a domineering boyfriend and a girlfriend who was willing to accede perhaps too much. No, not perhaps, certainly too much to his excesses and his tastes, and then feels regret afterwards. It's hard to imagine that there aren't some people in the jury who are thinking something along those lines at this point. That's given my take that I've gotten from people I've spoken with here who are witnessing the trial together with me. I'm Good Logic. I urge you to please like, share, and subscribe if you want more detailed, in-depth analysis. And I will go into greater detail and analysis tonight when I cover this on my live stream that's on YouTube and Rumble. And follow me on X @TheFollowingPro for more updates. Please make sure you hit the bell so you get all notifications. Until next time, Godspeed.